20%. Okay. Here we have 4 children. Here we go. Right? The girls, everybody's Armenian here, Armenian extraction. The girls have been growing up in America, and the boy is growing up in Armenia. And the question is his height normal? Is he stunted? Is he not stunted? The answer is it's impossible to tell. Right? At this age, he goes at 13, the boy is 14. Right? He's obviously significantly shorter, but grows mature faster than the boy. So is it possible that he's stunted? It's possible. Is it possible that he's just maturing late? And he has something called constitutional growth delay. It's also possible. Right? And the whole point here is, how would we know this? How would we be able to tell over time? Well, the only way would be to look at the growth charts. Right? To look at the growth chart for the boy and see how he's growing. So again, the main message that I'm going to give you is we have to measure growth accurately and plot that growth every time. Okay, so there, until 2006, most places, most countries used the CDC 2000 growth charts that were developed in the United States. They were looking, basically, this is called a growth reference, because there was no attempt to measure normal growth. What was done is there were a number of surveys of infants and children, and average growth was determined, and distribution was determined. Now, for those charts, majority of infants were fed formula. Only 33% reported some breastfeeding at 3 months of age, and most of these children were Caucasian. However, really, it makes no difference, right? Because what you're doing again in clinical practice is you're following growth over time. It really doesn't matter what growth chart you use, because what's happening is you're looking at how the child compares to him or herself in the last visit. In fact, the American Academy of Pediatrics still recommends that we use these charts for children over 2 years of age. Here's a chart, the 2006 World Health Organization chart. Now, what the WHO decided to do is they wanted to come up with a growth standard. In other words, how do children grow optimally in a nutritionally optimal environment? And these are the charts that you're using today. So they went to 6 different countries: Brazil, Ghana, India, Norway, Oman, and the United States. And for the children that, for the first 2 years of life, they did a prospective study where they enrolled children and used rather stringent criteria and looked to see how these children grow. So they took about 1,743 patients, completed the study, but originally they enrolled twice as many. But 50% of them dropped out. And the reason was that a lot of mothers added a lot of formula. But what the what WHO wanted was children who were predominantly breastfed until 1 year of age. They allowed children to get complementary foods between 4 to 6 months of age, which is, by the way, done for the purposes of making the American Academy of Pediatrics happy, because here, right, the World Health Organization has a recommendation not to add complementary foods until 6 months of age. And they also included children who had only high socioeconomic status because they didn't want nutrition to be an issue, right? They wanted a stable population so they didn't have dropouts because children have moved, right? And children had to live at an altitude of less than 1,500 meters. So now, what are the differences between the CDC 2000 and the World Health Organization charts? And what do we do with those differences? So first of all, the WHO charts have the 2nd and the 98th percentile, which do represent 2 standard deviations from the mean. So they therefore useful to identify things like stunting and also failure to thrive. The CDC charts only have the 3rd and the 5th and 95th percentile. There are some differences, right? Compared to the CDC charts, the World Health Organization Organization charts, in the first 3 months of life of children who are growing faster, right, than the children in the American charts. And after 3 months of life, the American children catch up, in fact overtake. Right? And there were, nevertheless, almost no differences in length. So when we're thinking about stunting, it really doesn't matter which chart you use. If you're looking at wasting, for example, or failure to thrive, what happens is there will be more infants who will be identified as underweight using the World Health Organization chart compared to the C charts if you're looking, CDC charts if you look in the first 3 months of life, and fewer if you're looking later on. But again, any of these charts will work fine in clinical practice because these differences are very small. In clinical practice, it's next to impossible to look at very small differences, so we're looking at much bigger, much larger differences. So a question was asked of me to talk about altitude, because as I already mentioned, the World Health Organization charts excluded children growing at altitude of less than 1,500 feet. So the question is what? Oh, sorry, greater than 1,500 feet, yes. And the question is, why might that be? So the first question I asked, well, what is the altitude here in Armenia? We know it's higher, but it turns out that 50% of Armenians live at altitude below 1,000 feet, 25% at 1,000 to 2,000 meters, 25% at 1,000 to 2,000 meters, and 25% who live above 2,000 meters. So the question, as somebody alluded to earlier today, could it be the high altitude which is associated with short stature, rather than poor nutrition, low SES, and low socioeconomic status, and genetics? So to answer that question, I did two things. First, I spoke to a colleague of mine who runs the Division of General Pediatrics in Children's Hospital in Denver. Because Denver is located at 1,500 feet, and there's some children, not so many, who live at altitudes higher than that. And so he was very surprised by the question. He said, you know, we never looked at that because we never saw any problems, right? And so the altitude to them was not an issue. However, when children are born at 2,500 meters or 3,000 meters, what they do see is delay in pulse ox, right? So when a child is born, the pulse ox may be low, the partial pressure of oxygen increases to normal in a couple of hours. In children at higher altitude, they see some delay, so it might take 24 hours. When they get into altitude above 3,500 to 4,000 meters, what happens is that they actually leave children on oxygen for the first day or two because of this problem. But as far as growth over time, they did not notice any problem. So that was one answer, but I thought, well, maybe you can find a paper. So I did a literature search, and really there hasn't been anything recently that's been done in this area. But there is a paper from 1982 that did a very interesting thing. What the authors of that paper did, is they compared how children are growing in La Paz, Bolivia, which is at 3,200 to 4,000 meters. Guatemala City, Guatemala, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's at 1,493 meters. No up and down, it's a very flat place. And Berkeley, California, that is at sea level. So, and they particularly looked at altitude, ethnicity, and height. So here's what they found. These are the males, here are the females, right? Here's the age from 8 to 14. And here's the height, right? What I have marked in orange is children who are coming from high socioeconomic status group. And so Berkeley, California, normal socioeconomic status for America. This is French Bolivian school. And it caters particularly to children of diplomats, children of engineers, children of doctors. These are the children who are growing up in Bolivia who do not have an issue with nutrition, having access to nutritious foods. And then you have the same thing here with the children from Guatemala. And as you can see, there is a slight difference between Berkeley and French Bolivian school, but the difference is rather small, right? And then you have this group here. The Aymara children are also Bolivian children, but first of all, these are children who are indigenously Maya, or descendants of Maya, and they are living at low socioeconomic status. So what the authors concluded is that actually the difference between children attending French school in Bolivia who were born and lived their whole life in Bolivia versus those that lived less than a quarter of their life in Bolivia is only 4 centimeters. And most of the height difference was due to the socioeconomic status rather than any other issue, because it is harder to get nutritious foods if you don't have a lot of money at higher altitude, right? Things don't grow as well and roads aren't as good. So the bottom line is, maybe there's a small effect in Armenia, but more than likely for majority of population, it's not really an issue. Okay, so what I want to do now is talk for a few minutes about growth charts. Because again, what I find that in clinical practice, growth charts is my weapon, it's my instrument to identify problems early and to be able to address them early. And that's really key. Okay, so first of all, it is difficult to measure length and height, believe it or not. Okay, so I can make myself a little bit taller, and I can make myself a little bit shorter, right? A centimeter and a half, just by doing this or doing this, right? And for me, it's not maybe a very big difference, but if you have somebody who is this short or this tall, it becomes a much more significant difference, right? So measuring height is actually, or length, is actually very, very difficult to do accurately. And it requires training, so therefore, if anybody is doing a study where they have to measure length, right, they use a specialized protocol, and usually they do it 3 times and then take the average, right? We don't do that in clinical practice. Okay, and even measuring weight can be a problem, especially with young children who won't stay still, who'll be jumping around, etc. Right? And then the next step is to take what you measured and plot it on a growth chart. So whereas we don't really have data for Armenia, right, as far as how well heights and weights are measured, right, I can tell you anecdotally that probably in my office, where I'm a big stickler for appropriate measurement of height and weight. So my staff knows that they have to do it accurately, because if I don't like what I see, because it looks off, it doesn't look right, then I go and do it myself. And then I go back to the staff assistant who's doing it and say, hey, what happened? Let's learn from this to make sure that we do a better job next time. So measurement is hard, but what about plotting? Plotting the growth chart, the growth on the growth chart is also a big problem. And here we do have some data thanks to Dr. Afsanisian. Oh, I said that right? Huh? Hovanesian, I'm sorry. Hovanesian, right? Who actually did a very nice study. She looked at 91% of growth charts from 5 different clinics. So that was 570 charts. She reviewed how the heights and weights were plotted to see if they were plotted accurately. And she found something very interesting, actually. So if you look overall, right, the weight for age was plotted correctly only 2/3 of the time. The height for age was plotted correctly also 2/3 of the time or so, whereas the weight for height, right, that's a really difficult thing to plot because it's very counterintuitive. There is no age, right? It was only plotted correctly a quarter of the time. But look at the distribution. There were 5 different clinics, right? Clinic 1 through 4 really did not do a very good job, right? Half the time was done accurately. Whereas Clinic 5 had weight and height plotted correctly 98% of the time, but weight for height was plotted half the time correctly. And again, basically saying it's very difficult to plot weight for height accurately. It's just not very, it's counterintuitive to do that.
They were all in Yerevan.
Yes, they were all in Yerevan, exactly. So what does that say? That say that we cannot take what's plotted on the growth charts for granted, right? I think that the growth charts are small, the ones that I've seen, it's not that easy, right? And if there is a problem, right, that the first thing to do is to reweigh and remeasure the child, and the second thing would be for the clinician, right? I'm sure you want more work, to do it yourself. Okay. And I think the second message is that, you know, it can be done better. If one clinic can do it correctly 98% of the time, then certainly, right, there's a lot of room for improvement in other clinics. So what do we need? We need better staff training, right? And I strongly suggest that there's a way to do computerized plotting. Right? There are programs available using Excel, for instance, with Excel spreadsheets that will do this for you. They're freeware. They're right now, the one that I am aware of uses CDC growth charts instead of World Health Organization growth charts, and is in English. But it's very easy to adapt. And every clinic that I visited so far, last time I was here 2 years ago, has a computer. So, and you don't need a sophisticated computer. You need a very basic computer that can run Excel. I think it will make everybody's life a lot easier, and we'll be able to identify problems a lot earlier, and therefore address issues both of growth faltering as well as overweight much earlier. So what about identification of growth faltering? What I'm going to do next is give you a preview of what pretty much we're going to be talking about tomorrow. So how is failure, clinically we use this definition, failure to thrive. Okay, I don't like it because it implies more, failure to thrive. The word thrive in English implies more than just poor growth. It implies also poor development and issues with both cognitive and motor development in the child. And you don't always see that. Certainly you don't usually see it early on when you have growth faltering. Okay, so what's the definition? It's crossing deceleration of weight across two major percentile lines on more than one consecutive occasion. So a child has to come in twice and cross two major percentile lines. And I mark the percentile lines. 5, 10, 25, 50, 75, 90, and 95 on the CDC growth charts. It would obviously be 2 and 98% on the World Health Organization charts. That's one way. The second way is weight for age below either the second percentile or the third percentile or the fifth percentile on the weight for age curve, or the height for age curve. Now, there's a lot of problems with this definition to use it in clinical practice. First of all, it's difficult to assess what's going on in the first visit. If you have a child who shows up for the first time and is at the 25th percentile, you don't know, maybe that kid was at the 50th percentile 3 months earlier. You have no idea. And that would be a pretty drastic change. Okay. It doesn't include in the definition whether it's symmetric failure to thrive or asymmetric. So in other words, all three, the height, the weight, and the head circumference are off, or just the weight or just the height, and the head circumference is spared. Clinically, that makes a big difference, as we'll talk about tomorrow. And finally, and this is the most confusing thing about this definition, is that healthy children often cross percentiles to adjust to the predetermined growth once they come out of the uterus. So the uterus is a pretty constraining environment. So there's something called catch-down growth and catch-up growth. So for example, catch-down growth, imagine you have a newborn who's large, doesn't have to be large for gestational age, just large, because the mother might have had gestational diabetes. Where I work, 50% of mothers have gestational diabetes, by the way. So we see this a lot. Right? Sometimes they're treated appropriately, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're not taking their medication, so the child comes out big. But genetically, that child might have genetic potential to be small. So now, right, they're not going to gain a whole lot of weight in the first 6 months of life and height. They're going to catch down to where they're meant to be genetically. The opposite example of that will be catch-up growth. Imagine you have a child who is born small because the mother has hypertension or other reasons for placental insufficiency. Again, that child will come out small, but over time will catch up. Right? So how often do children cross 2 percentile lines? So there's actually a study that was done in the United States to look at that. And so the Dr. May looked at both catch-up and catch-down growth, at least what I present here. You could, if you're interested, you can find that paper, look individually at catch-up and catch-down. And here's what she found, that 1/3 of the time, children, healthy children with no other medical issues, cross 2 percentile lines when they're 0 to 6 months of age. If you look at height for age and weight for age, but weight for height is crossed 2/3 of the time. That's a lot, right? And even at 6 to 12 months of age, right, there's a significant proportion of children who are crossing 2 percentile lines, even they're totally healthy, right? So what does that suggest? That suggests that the failure to thrive definition is incomplete. And really, it's very important to do an appropriate history and physical exam, and when necessary, laboratory workup, to know if there's really an issue there or not. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow in more detail. Okay, so again, the bottom line of what I have to say, and I have another 2 minutes to go and I'll be done, is that measure growth accurately, make sure your staff is measuring growth accurately, plot the growth accurately at every visit, and you'll have a very sharp instrument to work with to identify and deal with abnormalities related to growth early. So tomorrow we're going to look at these cases. So here we have a full-term boy who was born into a 37-year-old healthy woman. The child had low birth weight. You can see that here, right? Hypotonia, poor feeding. He also had some other problems like wide-set eyes, low-set ears, small jaw, and around the face. So here's his growth chart. What do we do with a kid like this? How do we approach it? And the way you would approach it here in Armenia is probably going to be different than how we would approach that in the United States. And so part of what we're going to talk about tomorrow is I'd like to have input from the group to talk about this. Okay, here's another child. This child is a full-term boy, born at 3,000 grams, slightly short, but not too short, and was mixed-fed formula and breast milk from 2 months of age, had difficult socioeconomic conditions, and parents were average size. So here we go. The height is okay, but obviously the weight falls off. So how do you approach that? Here's another chart that we're going to talk about. This is something that Dr. Hakimian and I identified the last trip. And again, it's here, it's a little hard to tell. The lines were drawn by us, but you could possibly see the dots. Maybe from the back you can see it. But here's a kid who's maintaining his weight, but the height starts to drop off at 6 months of age, and then practically the child gains no height until he is 12 months old, and then he does a return for follow-up. So there's a number of different possibilities. Possibility that this is measured accurately, possibility that weight is not measured accurately, possibility that height is not measured accurately, but the most concerning thing is that this kid was lost to follow-up. Here's a kid, since I do mostly obesity work, I decided to put this in. This is a child, a 2-year-old, who also has abnormal growth. So this is a weight for age chart. And as you can see, this girl started out being average, right, and stayed average, if you look at weight for age, until she got to be 2 years old, right? And now she's gained a lot of weight from 18 to 24 months old. But this is, the point here is it's very important to have an accurate weight for length chart and look at the weight for length chart. Remember, those things are not graphed accurately most of the time. Look what's happening with her. By the time she's around 12 months, she got very heavy. She comes off the growth chart somewhere around 15 months, right? And then she's really off the scale by the time that she's 2 years of age. What does that mean? It means that she's probably relatively short for her weight. But clearly, this is a case of obesity that we wouldn't have recognized if we just looked at weight for age until we got here. Whereas if we looked at the weight for length, we would be able to pick it up over here. And again, tomorrow, if we have time, I'll talk about how it's possible to treat it. And this is entirely treatable with the right approach. At least in the United States, the approach would have to be different here because of you have different culture here and different things going on. Okay, and finally, case 4. Now, here you have a kid. Here we go. Here is a kid who also falls off the chart and kind of stays off the chart, but kind of grows along the 3rd percentile or 5th percentile. The height is also kind of there, but also falls off the chart. And then eventually, when this child gets to be 17, they get back on the curve. Obviously, we can't wait till 17 to determine that this child is nutritionally fine and doesn't have some sort of problem going on. So what do we do when we are over here working with this child, as opposed to waiting to get all the way up there until he's 17? And that's going to be something that we talk about tomorrow as well. And finally, here is something that I see at least 40% of the time in clinical practice in the United States. This has to do with not eating the Armenian plate, but eating fast food plate. Right? Look at this. This is a BMI chart for a kid from 2 years of age. And this girl is tiny, right? She's at the 11th percentile for BMI. And look what's happening with her. She goes down to 8th percentile by the time she's a little bit under 4. And then between 4 and 5.5, right, what happens? Her BMI goes from the 8th percentile to 79. And you're going to say, how does that happen? Right? It happens. Again, I see this at least 30-40% of the time. The question is to identify this early and not wait till it gets this high up to be able to intervene. Because the higher this BMI gets, the harder it is to intervene in the long run. So then, again, talk about a little bit about tomorrow's session. We're going to review the nutritional needs of children 0 to 5 years of age. That should go pretty quickly because I think the general principles were outlined very well today. And I'll try to add something, but I'm not sure how much I'll be able to add. Secondly, and I think I'd like to spend some time on it, is to review approach to identification and treatment of children with growth faltering and also who get too heavy. And then make sure we have time to discuss how you approach it here. So in conclusion, growth tracking is key to early identification and treatment of growth faltering and overweight. Right? This is the instrument that we clinicians need to use accurately and to have sharpened. The World Health Organization 2006 or CDC charts can be used because the differences are small. For weight, the differences are negligible. For height, I'm totally happy with 2006 World Health Organization charts. It really doesn't matter. The important point is to use them well. The growth standard, I think, can be applied to Armenian children. I think the issue of altitude really is not a major issue because, again, you're comparing the child to him or herself. And in general, there isn't really any evidence to suggest that at altitudes of 2,000 meters, you're going to have a problem. And finally, again, I think that there would be a lot of benefit from learning how, coming up with a way to plot the growth electronically. At least we've seen that in the United States as we move towards electronic growth plotting. And at this point, everybody's plotting growth using a computer. It eliminates one of the two errors you can make. Okay, thank you very much. And any questions?
Can we have a microphone for being Salivekyan? Who took the microphone?
So everybody agrees?
No, we have
Great. No, we have a question.
we have the local experts.
Great.
Նորից շնորհակալություն եմ հայտնել։ Լսել եմ այս նման զեկույցը 2 տարի առաջ, այո։ Եվ կուզեի հարցադրումը ասել, որ 2 տարվա ընթացքում որոշ փոփոխություններ Հայաստանում եղել են այն իմաստով, որ ներկայումս կան ազգային ուղեցույցներ երեխաների աճի ու զարգացման գնահատման, մշակվել են ՄԱԿ-ի մանկական հիմնադրամի աջակցությամբ կրթական մոդուլներ, որով մանկաբույժները, ընտանեկան բույժները սովորում են ճիշտ անել այն ինչ որ դուք ներկայացրեցիք, որ արվում է սխալ։ Հարցս վերաբերվում է նրան, թե մենք նույնպես խոսում ենք CDC չարտերի մասին եւ 2000-ի եւ 2006 թվականի, բայց վերջին հրապարակումները առողջապահության համաշխարհային կազմակերպության ավելի շատ հողում անում են ոչ թե պերցենտիլային քարտերի վրա, այլ ստանդարտ շեղումներով զեց կորեների քարտերի վրա, որոնք այնուամենայնիվ որոշ չափով տարբեր են։ Հարցս նրան է, մենք հիմա քննարկում ենք արդյոք ազգային մակարդակով պետք չէ անցնել WHO-ի զեց կորե քարտերին, որովհետև տարբեր հրապարակումներ, տարբեր ուղեցույցներում հղումը զեցքոր քարտերի վրա է, ստանդարտ շեղումային քարտերի վրա, մասնավորապես մանկական հիվանդների ինտեգրացված վարման ծրագիրը, սա հարց մեկն է, ինչ տարբերություն եւ ինչ առավելություններ կան պերցենտինային քարտերի եւ ստանդարտ շեղումային քարտերի միջեւ, եւ երկրորդ հարցը, որ մեզ համար այսօր օրակարգում կա, դա նա է, որ եթե իհարկե տեղյակ եք արյան ճնշման նկատմամբ երեխաների սկրինինգի հարցն է, այն ուղեցույցը, որ մենք ունենք եւ ամերիկյան աղբյուրների վրա հենված ժամանակին մշակված 2006-ին, դա այն է, երբ որ մենք չափում ենք երեխայի ճնշումը եւ տեղադրում ենք պերցենտիլային քարտերի վրա, բայց այդ քարտերը 2000 թվականի CDC քարտերն են։ Արդյոք կա այդ կորելացիոն կապը զարկերակային ճնշում CDC 7 կորերով քարտը 2006-ի կամ եթե կա զեցքորների հետ համադրված քարտը, այդ նորմատիվ մշակելու հարցում միջով կարող եք մեզ օգնել։
So thank you for those questions. I think they're both very good questions. So as far as using Z-scores or Z-scores as opposed to percentile scores to plot growth, when papers are published, they're using Z-scores. The problem with Z-scores is that they're a little bit harder to conceptualize. And the whole point of using growth charts is to partner with the parents, right? And to show the growth chart from birth to the parents, so that the parents know most children, when they're born, will be on the chart. And so I use that technique all the time. I show every time I see a child in my practice, I show the growth chart to the parent so that the parent can feel good about the fact that the child is growing normally. The reason I do it, actually, is because it's very helpful for me when the child starts to fall off the growth chart and not gain adequate weight or height, or get too heavy. Because if I didn't show the growth chart, once I show the growth chart to the parent who's never seen a growth chart before, they say, but doctor, it's not the kid, it's the chart. Your chart just doesn't apply to my kid. Okay? And so now I don't have a partner in the parent because the parent, is not convinced that there's a problem. Whereas if I show the growth chart every time and the child is growing on that chart, when they start to go off the chart, then the parent gets concerned because they're used to the kid being on the chart. Now I have a partner. And I can't do anything myself, right? The only thing I can do is I can ask the parents to do certain things, work with the parents to negotiate what they will do, and then hope that they do it. So I need a partner in that. I think it would be a lot more difficult for parents to understand Z-scores than to understand the percentile scores. And Z-scores are flat, right? Again, hard to understand. Kids getting bigger, you would expect that as they get bigger, they should be higher in the growth chart than they were before. And also there's people in Britain who actually don't like Z-scores, particularly for BMI. So I think that using the percentile charts in clinical practice is absolutely fine. I wouldn't go away from that. Your second question was about blood pressure. Blood pressure is very hard, right? I can tell you with obesity, we should be picking up about 15% of children in clinical practice who have hypertension. Very difficult because the blood pressure really depends on height and not just age. And so you have to look at relatively sophisticated charts to be able to know the difference. Again, this is where electronic plotting and computers can be very helpful because they can adjust for that using an algorithm and just tell the doctor normal or abnormal, right? As opposed to us having to look for a particular chart. And that's what has been done in the United States. And I think we do better now at identifying hypertension than we did when we had to look at one chart to figure out what the height is, look at the other chart, and do it manually.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Very nice presentation and very clear. I would like to put you in a position that we usually, working in developing countries, we face. We are introducing height for age, but some countries are fighting back because they think this is too complicated. They would like to continue using only weight for age. If you need to select between the two parameters, it is a wise decision to select only one, and this is only one, which one? Or you prefer to really use the two in combination?
You know, this also a very good question, right? I usually prefer more rather than less, because I think the more information you have to work with, the better. Also, weight is a little bit more sensitive early on until you have loss of height. There is the Road to Health growth charts from the World Health Organization, which only have two lines on them. They have the 50th percentile line and the second percentile line. And those are a lot easier to use. And then all you have to look at is whether there's an increase in the slope on the graph from the previous visit, which is good, whether it is flattening, which is concerning, or whether there's a drop, which is clearly bad. So I think I would probably try to use the Road to Health growth charts before I would eliminate the height or the weight. Hope that answered.
Question? Go ahead.
Yes, please.
Ես ուզում եի հարցնել անհաս ծնված երեխաների
Please.
Ես ուզում եի հարցնել անհաս ծնված երեխաների համար մշակված աճի կորագծերի մասին։ Մինչև որ տարիքը պետք է կոռեկցել ունենալ կոռեկցված տարիք, որովհետև Հայաստանում հաճախակի անհաս ծնված երեխաների համար սովորական կորագծեր են օգտագործվում։ Շնորհակալություն։
Yes, so that's a very good question, and we will talk about that a little bit tomorrow. I don't want to get into dealing with premature children extensively because that's its own science. But generally, you would have to adjust, you know, the height, for instance, gets adjusted, if I remember correctly, the longest, and that's maybe 3 or 4 years of age. The weight up to 18 months, and I don't remember the head circumference, but we'll talk about it tomorrow. It's very important to adjust adjust the weight, the height on the graph, because otherwise it is going to be a problem. You know, you're going to make the child too small, essentially, and diagnose him with failure to thrive when he doesn't have it. The other issue, by the way, with that, since we're mentioning it, that when you're recommending adding, you know, changing the diet, so for instance, starting to give it complementary foods, you also have to age adjust the child. So if you have a child who is 3 months premature, right, then you shouldn't introduce or recommend introducing complementary foods at 6 months of age, because really that child is only 3 months of age. And so you have to wait till 9 months of age. So I know that parents often forget it, and even some of the doctors in training forget it. So it's a very important point to keep in mind if you don't regularly deal with premature children. So very good question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to ask all of the faculty from today to just sort of sit here along the stage. And if there's any last questions that you would like to ask us for today, we'll have that discussion. We were supposed to have a panel discussion about the need for data, but it seems that each one of our panelists has talked about the need for data. I think we're all pretty convinced that we would like to see more data. So I'm going to ask everybody to sit here. And in the meanwhile, what I would like to ask of the audience is for you to also fill out the evaluation that you have for our conference. We are very sincerely interested in meeting your needs. So if we have ever the opportunity to do this again, we would like for you to tell us what you would like information about and whether or not you liked today's conference. So could the faculty from today just sit up front? If anybody has any questions whatsoever, please raise your hand so we can give you the microphone. I'm going to ask Dr. Deckelbaum to just give us a couple of sentence summary from today, and then anybody who has a question, please raise your hand.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but you're good at that.
So today we've heard a lot of interesting information. I think that Armenia really has a very special situation because it's a small country. You have a good ministry, and I think that there's an ability to do something with what I would say are major nutritional problems that need to be solved. So I wonder how much do some of these probable deficiencies affect Armenian productivity and economic growth. I wonder how many of them are really going to be reversible. I would predict that a number are going to be reversible, and as we've talked about, we've seen examples of other countries that can do this in a short time, and really makes a big difference to decreasing healthcare costs and improving productivity. Omar, do you want to talk about, how interventions in Guatemala in children have improved adult productivity?
Well, thank you for the question. I will answer this and take also advantage for commenting other things. Many or most of a lot of the studies about how nutrition improves the individual and population development of a country were done in Guatemala. They tried to use correct complementary foods after 6 months of age. One only providing calories, and the other providing calories and micronutrients and protein, coming mostly from milk. And the results are the ones we are using worldwide to tell everyone working in public health nutrition that really putting focus in that age group is going to be extended even to the next generation. That means the salaries were better in those who grew up better, the work, the literacy, and even the children that they had, which means that really investing in nutrition is good for the individuals, the families, and the community. That's really do not have any doubt. It has been studied after study. But interesting in the Guatemalan case, stunting has been reduced very, very little. I mean, in 20 years from 60 to 10%. But the country as country do not have anemia, do not have vitamin A deficiency, do not have iron deficiency. Then it's interesting to know what is going on. Why all these different biomarkers are fine, but the growth is not good enough, which is a question similar that Armenia is saying something is here not correct. And I would like really to make my comment regarding that. Well, first is the response to Dr. Richler, is really that nutrition is important because that will help the society. Now move to growth monitoring. We learned today in the last talk that it's very difficult to do in clinical settings, where the colleagues are doing day after day and very carefully. Can you imagine what is our accuracy in a DHS study every 5 years with people that are not doing this every day? That means it's a huge type of really approximation. But that really will tell us is a relative response. That means what also impressed me today was the stunting rate in Armenia is going down. In the last 10 years, it's increasing. I mean, the stunting is worse. And that really needs to find why is that case. And here I would like to remind every one of us that probably in nutrition we made a mistake when we put a synonym to stunting. We say stunting and we classify that as chronic malnutrition. When we put the last name of malnutrition, we are classifying that as nutrients and nutrients as foods, when really growing is a response to the complete environment, which is the environment hygiene, the environment of the care of the family and the mother of the kid, is how the kid makes exercises, how the environment the kid is fine, and how the food is fine too. It's not only food, it's food, health, and care. And that was taught to every one of us 25 years ago. But we are missing that point. Always when we have that, we try to go into intakes instead of looking the overall picture. It was very nice, the picture that Eugene presented. The Armenian boy compared with the Armenian girls that are developing in the US. For trying to change this, the growing of a kid, we need to remove the kid completely from the environment. That means we need to take them from here to the other country, because it's not only the food. And that is also interesting to look at. Going in the Guatemalan case, why we are not really improving growth, improving the reducing stunting. There are many, many reasons. Probably it's not the altitude of RDC. We have the mycotoxins going around. It's very high in some of these areas. In that case, it's in maize. And they are affecting animals. There is no reason why we're not affecting human beings. We are the same group of living beings. The kids are not allowed to do exercise. It's something like Dr. John was telling us. The kids are very well cared to the point that they don't move for 2 years. If they don't move for 2 years, there's not interest for growing. The body will not have any interest. The other explanation that I also give to this one is that our height is an adaptation to our environment. It's only the reflect that we are living in a limited type of condition. And it's an adjustment to survive. If, instead of dying, I'm short. If I'm short, I need less energy, less everything. And then when I grow and I move to a diet that is rich in everything, I will go overweight very easily. That means all these complications we are not discussing in public health nutrition. But the overall goals of the World Health Assembly is that we need to reduce stunting in certain percentage during the certain period of years. What we need to see is that the community and the individuals are growing accordingly what they were in that condition. I mean, it's better to see the change in the growing in the same community and not against completely in absolute terms with this WHO CDC chart. What I'm trying to say is that we should pay more attention to the changes in the growth and weight rather than the absolute term, because otherwise we can make incorrect assumptions. I would like to ask you to respond to my comment, because you are an expert in the growing charts and how is the difference between individuals and populations, which you clearly made the difference.
Well, again, I think that what you do in public health is very different than what we do in clinical practice. In public health, we can look at small differences and look at small improvements. In clinical practice, especially if you have an imprecise tool to measure and then have a problem plotting, you're not going to pick up very small differences. You're going to pick up differences more than 10-15%. It really depends on where you are on the growth chart. If you're at the extremes of the growth chart, obviously it's even harder than if you're in the middle of the growth chart. But I think that's okay because, clinically, typically what happens is once you pick up the difference has to be enough to be able to address it. When the differences are very small, there isn't enough time, and clinicians don't have enough instruments to really pick up on small nutritional differences or otherwise. So it's just a very different thing to do. And again, we need both. We need public health, and we need to improve clinicians' abilities to recognize and give clinicians tools to be able to influence parents so that they can influence growth and development in their children. And that goes one step at a time, from recognition to plotting to getting tools to be able to influence parents. And again, with obesity, we've learned that you have to plot the growth on the growth chart to be able to see when the child is getting overweight. No one can recognize it just by looking at the child. We also learned that unless you partner with the parents, you're not going to be able to help parents make changes. And partnering with parents is a science. So there's different techniques. For instance, something that we call motivational interviewing, which is one way of dealing and speaking with the parents to help parents see that there's a problem and influence them. It's not enough to tell the parents, hey, you got to change your behavior, you have to change, do things differently. You have to get the parents to want to make the change. And that's a lot more difficult, especially when you're time constrained. So I think that's the long answer to a very good question.
Any questions from the audience? Oh, we have to go first.
No. Keep it with you.
Oh, we
We'll
have to
use the other microphone.
Ես կարծում եմ, որ վերջի հարցը կտամ, ինքնից չարաշային բոլորից օմնակ եմ խլում։ Խոսքս ուզում եմ ուղղել Օմար Զարին այն երկու մտորումների հետ կապված, որ DHS-ը, ժողովրդագրական առողջապահական հարցերի հետազոտությունը, դա մոտավոր հավանական սխալով ցուցանիշ մոտավորապես, եթե ճիշտ հասկացա։ Եվ նույն խոսքի մեջ նշվեց, որ հանրային առողջապահական եւ կլինիկական զննումները եւ գնահատումները մի քիչ տարբերվում են եւ խնդիրը խնդրի տարածվածության գնահատումն է եւ ես նորից պետք է շեշտեմ, որ DHS-ը 95% վստահելիության միջակայքով հետազոտություն է եւ ներկայացական ազգային եւ մարզային մակարդակներով։ Այստեղ է, որ ուզում եմ ասեմ, որ բոլոր այդ բիոմարկերները, բժիշկները, որոնք աշխատել են, շատ լավ տրեյն են անցել եւ բոլորը հիմնական խումբը կրկնվում է տարբեր DHS-ների մեջ եւ բավականին լավ փորձառությունից հետո նրանք 2 ամսվա ընթացքում մոտ 3000-4000 երեխայի կշռում չափում են։ Այստեղ ասելիքս նա է, որ տարբեր DHS-երի համար ցուցանիշների մոտ լինելը, բայց աճը իսկապես խոսում է այն փաստը, որ չի իջնում ցուցանիշը, եւս խոսում է խնդրի մասին։ Այն որ տարբեր ծուղերի ցուցանիշները այնուամենայնիվ երկու ստանդարտ շեղումով պլյուս մինուս միջակայքի մեջ են, դա նույնպես ապացուցված է, հավաստի են այս տվյալները prevalence-ի առումով, որպես հանրային առողջապահական խնդիր։ Եվ այս կոնտեքստում, քանի որ կան կարծիքներ, անվստահություն այդ հետազոտության նկատմամբ, մի փոքրիկ ուզում եմ հստակեցնել այս հարցը, եւ երկրորդ հարցը, որ ուզում եմ նորից նույն հարցի շարունակություն որպես ասել։ Մենք բոլորս գիտենք, որ երեխայի աճի տեմպերը կախված են եւ սննդի պակասից, աղքատության հետ կապված եւ միջավայրից եւ նոր գիտելիքից, գենետիկան, սոցիալական միջավայրը, անխոս աշխարհագրական դիրքը, բայց չէ որ մենք հիմա խոսում էինք 0-5 տարեկան երեխաների համար։ Կուզեի հարցը ձևակերպել այսպես. այս գործոններից որոնք են ավելի մեծ տեսակարար, արդյոք գենետիկական գործոնը էական է եւ մեծ է 0-5 տարեկան երեխաների համար, թե սնունդը, սննդակարգը, որովհետեւ մեր հետազոտությունը փաստում է, որ անգամ բարեկեցիկ ընտանիքներում թեր աճը երեխաների, աճի տեպերը կանտավման բավականին բարձր են, միջին ստանդարտ պոպուլացիոն ցուցանիշից, այսինքն կուզեի փոքրիկ մեկնաբանություն լիներ, նշված բոլոր գործոնները հավասարաչափ բոլոր տարեկան խմբերում են, թե այնուամենայնիվ 0-5 տարեկանում դա սննդի գործոնը առավել կարևոր է, ինչ կարծիք կա, բոլորին եմ հարցնում։
Well, this is a very interesting discussion and I'm happy to be here because it has been one of the main discussions inside USAID. And WHO and the UN is really putting as one of the development goals is to reduce stunting. That's one of the development goals. But here discussing among experts, we among themselves we are not so clear what growth alter is the meaning. And then we have a goal to reach, and we are going to measure that. One thing is measuring growth in the kid, because that is for taking decisions timely and individual and having the parents' alliance working with us. Another is one to use growth as monitoring tool. And I think it's a good monitoring tool. But the 95 representative statistically is the size of the sample that is going to be meaningful for the country if the parameters are with good accuracy. I mean, the number of kids that are going to be measured is fine, is statistically done, because that is going to the variation. My point is that we probably have not given sufficient attention to the quality of the data. I mean, we cannot compare sometimes country per country, because that is going to depend on the team. If it's the same team every 5 years, there is a relative response. No matter it's out for 2-3%, it doesn't matter, because it's relative response. What we have seen in Armenia is that the stunting has increased, because if we assume that the same group with the same quality is done, it doesn't matter the number. What is telling us is that stunting is increasing. Then the question is, why is happening that? And that could be the quality of the diet, moving from a good, better diet, moving to a Western type of diet. This is one part. The second one is that probably parents do not have sufficient attention to the kid because they're doing other things. Could be that the kids now are not playing outside so much. That means growing is a response to the environment. It's not only the food. That is why we need really to look what they are eating and look protein, energy, plus all of the other proteins, because that will help us. It's part of the story, but not the complete part. The others are also important to look at it. And finally, what I'm saying is, I will monitor always stunting, because that is a quality of the society. That means we can try to make that genetics, but it's not genetics at the end. Mostly it's the quality of the society. And that will tell me if I'm going good or not. And that is an instrument that we can do until something is here incorrect. What is the reason? I cannot precise, but something is happening that needs to be changing.
So, Omar, you said earlier that you haven't had, in Guatemala, there weren't great results in reduction of stunting. So, stunting in different countries is different. So if you look at Guatemala, look at India, Bangladesh, they all had, and Guatemala I assume too, had high rates of low birth weight.
Yes.
Armenia does not have high low birth weight, and that means that the babies aren't short at birth, because there's an association with birth weight. So what's happening here that's different perhaps than other countries is that stunting's happening after delivery. And that means that there's a greater likelihood that you can make a big difference on interventions that will affect stunting. And as Omar said, it's not all food. Take a country like Bangladesh, 50%, the average age of the baby, the mother at first delivery is 14, so it's a teenager getting delivered. That's a great risk factor for low birth weight and subsequent stunting. At Columbia, there's an environmental health study in sort of disadvantaged neighborhoods in New York City and Manhattan. And there it's shown that environmental pollutants actually result in decreased height achievement, decreased head circumference. So there's major effects of the environment. And there's, I think in Armenia, along with westernization of the diet, there's been marked westernization in terms of other things like automobiles, potential pollutants, potential toxins that may show up in different parts of the food chain. Mining. Yeah. So,
Poverty initiatives as well.
yeah.
Okay, I think this will be our last question. No? More? We have time.
Yeah,
We have the translator.
Շնորհակալություն բոլոր զեկույցների համար։ Ես մասնավորապես կուզենայի մեկնաբանել Վալենտին Տիկեվիչի ներկայացրած նկարը, հավատացնում եմ ձեզ, որ Հայաստանի աղջիկների հետ նկարված նույն երիտասարդը կարող է ավելի ցածրահասակ լիներ, որովհետև աղջիկները շուտեր ավելի քարքամ են մինչև սերմանասունացման ավարտը, այսինքն 16-17 տարեկանից հետո այլևս չեն աճում, մինչև տղաները աճում են մինչև 25 տարեկան։ Ես մեկ անգամ ևս կուզենայի դա շեշտել, որ դա կապ չունի աղջիկները Ամերիկայից էին, թե Հայաստանից։ Շնորհակալություն եմ ուզում հայտնել Օմար Գալիին այն հիշատակման համար, որ 2010 թվականի DHS տվյալները Հավանաբար մեծ շեղում են տվել այն պատճառով, որ անալիզները ճիշտ չեն կատարվել, մատից վերցրատարինի եւ հետո նման պրոցեդուրայի պատճառով այդ տվյալները մենք նույնպես կասկածի ենք ենթարկել, ճիշտ այնպես ինչպես վերջի հեղինակներն են կասկածի ենթարկել, որ հավանաբար դրանք սխալ են իրականացվել։ Ինչ վերաբերում է սննդակարգին եւ շրջակա միջավայրին, միանշանակ դրանք բոլորը դեր կատարում են երեխայի եւ աճի եւ առողջության վրա, ինչպես նաեւ ֆիզիկական ակտիվությունը, ինչպես նաեւ մշակույթը, ինչի հետ են համատեղ։ Ես կուզենայի անդրադառնալ պարոն Դիկելբաումի այն մտքին, որ այո, էպիգենետիկ շեղումներ են առաջանում սննդակարգի պատճառով, եւ էպիգենետիկ շեղումները հատկապես առաջանում են սինթետիկ վիտամինների պատճառով, որոնք բնական էնզիմային համակարգը շատ դժվարությամբ են մտափոխանցում եւ հետագայում էլ ավելի դժվարությամբ են դրանք մետաբոլացնում։ Մասնավորապես ինչ վերաբերում է ֆոլասոստին, որը առաջին մետաբոլիկ փուլը անցնում է լյարդում եւ շատ քիչ քանակն է մետաբոլացվում բնական ֆոլատի, իսկ մնացածը անցնում է արյան շրջանառության համակարգ։ Եվ լինելով ագրեսիվ քիմիական էլեմենտ, ինքը կապում է բնական ֆոլատի մետաբոլիկ շղթայի մասնավորաբար ռեցեպտորները եւ ինքն է մասնակցում։
Եկեք մասնագիտական հարցերը թողնենք մասնագետներին, հարց տվեք։
Ես կուզենայի, որ մեկնաբանեին նման բաները, չէ՞ որ էպիգենետիկ շեղումները իսկապես վտանգավոր են մեր առողջության համար։ Շնորհակալություն։
If I could just comment on specifically folic acid. So generally the epigenetic changes that are associated with folic acid are beneficial, actually. Yes, they are. But aside from epigenetic changes, folic acid interventions are used, for example, in areas where it's like Bangladesh, where there's an epidemic of arsenic poisoning, and to detoxify the adverse effects of arsenic and other kinds of pollutants, folic acid is generally found to be helpful. On the other hand, certainly low levels of folic acid have been associated, as we discussed this morning, are really associated with major health problems.
Well, I would like to answer the question. The things that are added either in the supplement or fortified foods, some of them are natural, only extracted from the organism that is synthesized in them. Our organism is going to process both in the same way. I mean, it's nothing different how the body is going to see the vitamin B1, niacin, B6, iron, or the folic acid. They are going to see in the same way. It's not that concerned. Not in this type of compounds. Usually we try to make the difference, but it's not. Metabolically they are similar. What makes the difference is the amount, and that is what we need to take the difference. That means the United States, all the Americas, Chile, have been using this without any difficulty. When the amount is too large of folic acid, some of them will be free in circulation. But the amounts are relative, biological, normal, they're not concerned at this time. And I think this is something that is important to put it, because metabolically they are the same, but then we need to see how to use them in a better way. But this is something that we need to really stress. There is no different things. That means it is only the application of the human knowledge in our diet. Let me make here a comparison. The human being is not a natural animal anymore. The human being left the nature 10,000 years ago. When they started having crops and having animals to rear, we don't need to go and hunt, we don't need to go and have fruits. And now we extend our lives beyond any other times. I mean, we have improved our system in such a way that we are an artificial animal. If we are an artificial animal, our diet is not natural anymore. I mean, we need to adapt that natural diet as much as our knowledge allows us to do. That's the presentation that Kim and Shannon were doing today. It was very nice. it's possible to fill all the nutrients with the diet. That is a lesson. But now the challenge is how to make that diet for everyone. That's the challenge. If we cannot do the diet for everyone, we need to change it in some way, according to our knowledge. When now we are going in aging beyond 80 years old, we are going beyond that. And because we are going beyond that, our intestine is not absorbing vitamin B12. That means this was nothing that our ancestors need to face. Because at 80 years of age, they were already dead. I mean, this is something that they don't worry about, or even the cancer. But now, because we are in that problem, we need to give B12 to the elderly. I mean, in some other way, because the diet is not going to improve. That is why we need to be open to the advance of the science, because we are a different living being now. We need to face that, and we need to adapt our science and adjust that, because this is the way the science is going on. We cannot stop that, but take decisions according to what it looks for us wise now. For example, 10 years from now, we can find things that are not absolutely correct, we adjust. But we cannot live in the past, because that is something that is not helping us.
Եթե կարելի է վերջին հարցը, որովհետև մենք արդեն ժամկետից ավել ենք և մեր թարգմանիչները ավել չեն կարող մնալ, վաղը մենք շարունակելու ենք մեր զրույցը և քննարկումները և ում որ թեման ավելի շատ հետաքրքրի լինելու են առանձին և շատ մանրամասն քննարկումներ առանձին թեմաների շուրջ։ Այնպես որ վաղը քննարկելու ենք, եթե կա վերջին հարցը,
Thank you to the translator. You did an excellent job. Thank you, translator.
Thank you very much. Թարգմանչական սարքերը խնդրում եմ վերադարձնել գնալուց առաջ։ Շնորհակալ, խնդրում եմ չմոռանաք պայուսակների մեջ թարգմանչական սարքերը։
Մեր հետ կապան կա քոլեջի հետ։
Argentina. How do you translate it?
I don't know. I have to ask them.
What did you say was phenomenal?
I don't know. I was worried about that. I forgot to recite it. Just be very slowly. Because what happens is that when I'm in school, I forget that I'm 5 minutes on the phone and then I'm in school longer. I forgot again. But I think
비례하면 내 까르네. 네, 인공 Давай, So he was using that.
That's going to teach. And Berkeley's going to be one of the areas.
Ամեն ինչ որոշվում է հիմա։
Pop it, or put it in the food. Or if there's milk, put it in the pot. Because they're already doing that with vitamins. Camera in So even though vitamin A is fat soluble, it is really source of fat. I came last Tuesday night. I was flying East Coast via Moscow to Amsterdam. Are you going to Moscow? Great. Yeah, I can't wait.
Hello.